Imagine you're walking into a crowded room. Nothing unusual is happening. People are talking. Some are laughing. Others are looking down at their phones. Then someone glances in your direction, just for a second, and almost instantly, your mind begins writing a story. Did I look awkward? Was that a strange expression? Did I say something wrong earlier? By the time you've found a place to sit, you're no longer paying attention to the conversation. You're paying attention to yourself. You become aware of your posture, your hands, your voice, the way you're smiling, even the way you're breathing. It's as if an invisible spotlight has suddenly been switched on, and somehow everyone in the room is watching, or at least that's what it feels like. The strange part is that this doesn't only happen in crowded rooms. It happens after sending a text, after posting a photo, after speaking in a meeting, after introducing yourself to someone new. Sometimes it happens hours later, when you're lying in bed, replaying a conversation that everyone else has probably forgotten. You wonder whether you talked too much, whether you sounded unintelligent, whether that joke was inappropriate, whether they secretly judged you. Eventually, you ask yourself the question millions of people quietly carry through life. Why do I care so much about what other people think? Most of us answer that question the same way. I guess I'm just insecure. It sounds reasonable. Maybe you've even promised yourself that one day you'll stop caring. You'll become confident, fearless, completely unaffected by other people's opinions. But what if that goal is impossible? Not because you're weak, but because your brain was never designed to ignore other people in the first place. Think about it. If a deer suddenly lifts its head and starts staring into the distance, the rest of the herd immediately becomes alert. Not because they know there's danger, because someone else noticed something. For social species, paying attention to others isn't a flaw, it's survival. Humans are no different. For most of our evolutionary history, we didn't live as isolated individuals. We lived in small groups. Your chances of finding food, raising children, and surviving harsh conditions depended on the people around you. Being accepted wasn't simply pleasant. It was essential. Being rejected could carry serious consequences. Over thousands of generations, our brains became remarkably sensitive to social signals. Smile, a frown, a change in someone's tone of voice, a moment of silence. After we spoke, these tiny cues helped our ancestors predict whether they were safe within the group. That ancient system still exists. Today, only the world around it has changed. You're probably not worried about being abandoned by your tribe because you stumbled over a sentence during a presentation. Yet your brain doesn't distinguish social discomfort as neatly as you do. To your conscious mind, it's an awkward moment. To older, deeper systems inside the brain, it's information that might matter. And here's the first twist. You don't care about other people's opinions because you're fragile. You care because your brain is constantly trying to answer one question. Am I still accepted? That question runs quietly beneath countless everyday experiences. Before you speak, before you post something online, before you wear a new outfit, before you express an unpopular opinion. Most of the time, you don't even notice it's there. You only notice the anxiety that comes afterward. But here's where the mystery deepens. If your brain is simply trying to protect your place within a group, why does it sometimes exaggerate harmless situations into emotional disasters? Why can one critical comment outweigh 10 compliments? Why do complete strangers on the internet sometimes affect us more than people who genuinely care about us? And perhaps the strangest question of all, if everyone is so busy worrying about how they're being judged, who is actually doing all the judging? The answer lies in one of the brain's most convincing illusions. An illusion so persuasive that most of us mistake it for reality, and once you see it, you'll never experience social anxiety in quite the same way again. The illusion is surprisingly simple. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. Imagine walking into work wearing a brand new jacket. At first, you feel confident. Then someone glances at you. Another person smiles. A third looks in your direction for half a second. Suddenly, your mind starts connecting dots that may not even exist. They're looking at the jacket. Maybe it's too flashy. Maybe I shouldn't have worn this. By lunchtime, you're convinced everyone has noticed, but If you asked your co-workers later that day what you were wearing, most of them probably couldn't tell you, not because they weren't paying attention, because they were busy wondering what you thought about them. That's the strange irony of being human. We're all actors, convinced everyone else is the audience, when in reality, everyone else is standing on their own stage, worrying about their own performance. Research in psychology has repeatedly shown that people consistently overestimate how much others notice their appearance, mistakes, and awkward moments. Not by a little, by a lot. Your brain isn't seeing reality. It's seeing reality from the only perspective it has ever known, your own. Think about the last embarrassing thing you witnessed someone else do. Maybe they stumbled over a word, dropped their coffee, forgot someone's name. How long did you think about it afterward? A minute? Maybe 5? Now compare that to your own embarrassing memories. Some of them have stayed with you for years. Not because they were objectively more important, because your brain recorded them from the inside. Every emotion, every heartbeat, every uncomfortable second. That emotional intensity makes the memory feel far bigger than it appeared to anyone watching. But the spotlight effect is only half the story, because even if people aren't paying as much attention as you, imagine one negative opinion can still feel unbelievably powerful. Why? The answer goes back thousands of years. Imagine living in a small tribe. If one person disliked your cooking, it wasn't a big deal. But if the entire group stopped trusting you, your chances of survival changed dramatically. Your brain learned a simple rule: social acceptance matters, and because losing acceptance could be costly, your brain evolved to pay closer attention to negative social feedback than positive feedback. One compliment feels good, one criticism can echo in your mind for days, not because criticism is always more accurate, but because your brain treats it as more urgent. This is closely related to what psychologists call the negativity bias, our tendency to give greater weight to negative experiences than equally positive ones. Imagine receiving 100 comments on something you created. 98 are supportive. One says, "This doesn't make any sense." Another says, "I've seen better." Which ones stay with you? Almost everyone knows the answer. Your brain circles back to the criticism, not because it enjoys making you miserable, because it's asking a survival question. Is there something here that could help us avoid rejection next time? And that's where things become dangerous, because your brain doesn't just remember criticism. It starts predicting it before you even speak. It imagines someone disagreeing before you share an idea. Imagines someone laughing before you post online. It imagines strangers judging you. None of those things have happened yet, but your brain prepares for them anyway, not because it's pessimistic, because prediction is one of its most important jobs. In fact, much of what your brain does each day isn't simply reacting to the world. It's constantly generating predictions about what might happen next, using your past experiences as a guide. Sometimes those predictions protect you. Sometimes they trap you. Because after enough repetitions, you stop asking, "What do people think of me?" And you start assuming you already know the answer. That's the moment fear quietly becomes certainty. Except it isn't certainty at all. It's a prediction your brain has repeated so many times that it now feels like reality. And if that prediction can be learned, there's one extraordinary possibility. It can also be rewritten. But rewritten doesn't mean pretending you suddenly don't care. That's one of the biggest myths about confidence. We admire people who seem completely unaffected by criticism, people who speak their minds without hesitation, who post their work without checking the comments every 5 minutes, who walk into a room without wondering what everyone thinks. From the outside, it looks like they simply stopped caring. But that's rarely what happened. They didn't stop caring about people's opinions. They became more selective about which opinions deserved their attention. And that's a completely different skill. Think about someone learning to drive. The first time they sit behind the wheel, every sound feels important. Every car seems too close. Every mistake feels catastrophic. Their brain is collecting information, constantly asking, "Am I doing this right?" Months later, the exact same person drives while holding a conversation. The roads didn't become safer. Their brain simply learned which signals mattered and which ones could safely be ignored. Confidence develops in much the same way, not by silencing your brain, but by teaching it to recognize the difference between real feedback and imagined judgment. Here's something fascinating. Your brain can never directly access another person's thoughts. It can't read minds. It can't see intentions. It can't know what someone truly thinks about you. So what does it do instead? It guesses. It takes a glance, a pause, a facial expression, a delayed text message. Then it fills in the missing pieces. The problem is, those guesses often say far more about your own fears than they do about reality. Imagine receiving a message that simply says, "We need to talk tomorrow." Nothing else, no explanation, no context. Some people immediately assume they're in trouble. Others barely think about it. The message didn't create the anxiety. The interpretation did. Your brain is constantly writing stories to explain uncertainty. Sometimes those stories are accurate. Sometimes they're completely fictional. Yet your body reacts to both almost the same way. That's why imagined rejection can feel nearly as painful as real rejection. Not because your brain is irrational, but because uncertainty has always been expensive for a species that depended on cooperation to survive. Which brings us to the final twist. Perhaps you've spent years trying to become someone who doesn't care what people think. Maybe that's the wrong goal, because caring isn't the problem. Caring helped humans build families, communities, friendships, civilizations. Without caring about one another, trust could never exist. Empathy could never exist. Love could never exist. The real question isn't whether you care. It's who gets to shape the story you tell about yourself. If your self-worth changes every time a stranger disagrees with you, you're allowing people who barely know your name to define someone they've never truly met. But if your identity is built from your values, your actions, your character, then other people's opinions become information instead of instructions. They can teach you without controlling you. And something remarkable begins to happen. The room doesn't become less crowded. Social media doesn't become less judgmental. Criticism doesn't disappear. What changes is your relationship with it. You stop asking, "How can I make everyone approve of me?" and start asking, "Does this opinion actually deserve a place in my mind?" That single question quietly shifts the balance of power, because your brain still notices social signals. It always will. But now, you're the one deciding which signals become beliefs. Think back to the beginning of this video. The room full of people. The feeling that every eye was watching you. The invisible spotlight. It never really disappeared. It simply wasn't pointing where you thought it was. Most people weren't studying you. They were standing beneath their own spotlight, wondering if you were judging them. And maybe that's the greatest irony of all. We're all afraid of being seen by people who are far too busy worrying about being seen themselves. So the next time you hesitate to speak, to create, to wear something different, or to be unapologetically yourself, remember this: you are not living inside other people's minds. You are living inside your predictions about other people's minds. And predictions are not destiny. They are simply stories your brain has learned to tell. The beautiful thing about stories is that they can always be rewritten.